This is The High Road with author and registered psychotherapist, Dr. Marlene Bizub. Dr. Marlene speaks to the heart of people who need to be lifted up and get out of the muck and mire that often accompanies major life changes, such as divorce or separation. Dr. Marlene will aspire to help parents of divorce to love their children more than they hate their ex, and to learn to take the high road. So please welcome the host of The High Road, Dr. Marlene.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Welcome, George. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you again, Dr. Marlene, and good morning, at least in our time zone.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So we are coming up on summer months, and that's when a lot of co-parents argue a lot about what they're supposed to be doing for vacations. And for example, we just not long ago had Easter. We're going to have Mother's Day. Most kids have had spring break. We're going to have Memorial Weekend. We're going to have 4th of July. Then we're going to have Labor Day. Oh, and I forgot Father's Day in there. Sorry about that. Father's Day, a very important holiday. And then in the middle of all those holidays, we have vacation time. Kids are out of school on summer break. So we have summer vacation. George, I don't know how much you deal with this. I'm going to let you share, but I deal with people fighting all the time about whether they do makeup time, how much makeup time, like a parent will miss a weekday and want a weekend day in exchange. And so we're going to talk about some things like that, like exchanging like time. But before we get there, let's talk about what things we do make up, because we don't make up all of those days, right?
No, not at all. And of course, my first response to a client who has issues around that would be, have you looked at your parenting plan?
Right, right. That's always the first thing to tell them. Direct them to the parenting plan, because usually it is addressed. And it's amazing how many people don't look at their plan and they just do what they think makes sense. And it's like, well, what does your order say? Oh, I don't know. So,
Well, and
yeah,
that's my first response. My second response
yes,
is, if you've made an agreement with your ex, have you written it down somewhere, at least an email?
right, right. Because as we've talked about before, parents will change things. And if they both agree, it's okay from what's in their order. So if they agree for this holiday, I'm not going to be here, go ahead and take it. Okay, does that necessarily mean you're going to get their holiday next year? Some parents assume that, but the other parent did not assume that and did not agree to that. And their thought is, I'm happy to take the holiday for you and have the child or children for that day if you're not going to be here. But that doesn't mean I'm willing to give mine up next year. And so if it isn't in writing, it didn't happen. And we revert back to the order. And like you said, even an email will help. That'll help a lot, because it will show us, or show the court if they end up before the court, what they did, and that they did in fact trade, and they did agree that it would be a trade, not just, okay, I'll assume your time, but I'm not agreeing to give up mine. Because you know what I find, and you can tell me if you experience the same, is often the parents don't discuss it. They don't talk about whether it's going to just be, you take mine because I'm not here, or I'll trade you for next year. They don't talk about that. They just say, I'm not going to be here. Can you take it? Yes, I can. And there the issue begins.
Well, and I think, first of all, lawyers have to buy into the idea that perhaps the greatest gift a parent can give his or her child, a parent of divorce or separation, is permission in word and deed to love their other parent at a
Yeah.
time when that person is perhaps hurting, angry, feels betrayed, violated, and so forth. It takes a great deal of courage and selflessness, but it is an investment in the relationship with their child for life. And then
Yes.
after lawyers buy into that, which I think probably a lot of family law attorneys do, and to their credit, and then we have to gently advise our clients of that and educate them to that extent. If they get crossways and are squabbling at the end of the school year about what they're going to do in the summer, if it escalates to a point of litigation, they're not going to get into court for that
No,
summer.
no, no. And that was my thought when I said earlier, that's what you're going to need in court. I was going to say, or the thought ran through my mind, if you get into court, because you're probably not going to get into court that quickly.
No, no, not at all. I think it depends on the jurisdiction, but a lot of times my experience was it would take at least 2 months to get a court hearing date.
Right. And people start fighting about this stuff maybe 2 weeks before, but not 2 months before. And so they're not going to get before a court. And I also have people tell me, well, I'll just have my attorney file an emergency motion. Well, this is not going to be deemed an emergency by the court. It's your emergency. It's not an emergency per the court.
No, but it brings to mind that old saying, poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part.
That's right. That's
And
right. And that's so
that's how
true.
the court's going to look at it with that attitude.
Absolutely. Plus, tell me what you think about this. I think a judge is going to look negatively at you for not planning ahead, not thinking about this, for thinking that it's an emergency. I mean, I think it bodes poorly for the parent who wants to file an emergency motion over something like this.
Oh, absolutely. I think it completely undermines their credibility.
Yeah.
The court probably, I don't know if this is too strong a language, but the court, I would think, would resent uh, being infringed upon that way, as far
Yes,
as trying to take that docket time for a matter which is not an emergency, not even close.
that's right. That's right. And that's what a lot of parents don't realize is, like you said, their lack of planning does not constitute an emergency. And when they say, but I need to know by next week, isn't that an emergency? Not to the court. What's gonna happen to your children if you don't get it figured out? They'll go somewhere, they'll be okay. So no, it's not an emergency. An emergency is when there's, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the attorney, not me. But that's where there's like an endangerment type issue, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And again, for the your viewers and listeners, an emergency motion for endangerment, we talk about significant emotional impairment or physical harm.
Yes, yes. And so, absent a parent, no, I'm not going to go there. I was about to say something I think I'll regret, so we won't go there. Let's talk a little bit about what gets made up and what doesn't. Okay, to me, it's common sense that if you both get 2 weeks in the summer or whatever it is in your order, we're not going to try to make up the whole 2 weeks. I mean, that makes no sense. It's not practically possible. It's probably possible, but it's not practical. Let's just put it that way. But a lot of parents don't agree about making up Mother's Day, Father's Day. Okay, first of all, let's start there because right there, there's Mother's Day and there's Father's Day. So, yes, one year yours might fall on their time, it might not, and theirs might fall on your time, it might not. But in the big scheme of things, there's going to be a certain number of them for both parents that fall on the other parent's time. And so it's all going to come out even in the end. And it's not like, well, mine fell on my time, but yours fell on my time, so I get mine made up. No, you don't. We just don't make a day up, especially when both parents get a similar day.
Well, no, and we need to reassure parents that trading out a day here or a day there, or coming up, perhaps the other parent gets a day or two or three or four more in the trade or the arrangement. That's not going to impact child support, because a
No,
lot of parents try to run their calendar based on counting number of days, and that's going to impact the child support. And initially, it does. Uh, but trading out and doing things like that, that's not going to constitute grounds for a change in child support.
no, because we're talking a day or two in the whole year. And so, because we alternate holidays, I'll move on to like Easter or Memorial Day or 4th of July. That is usually one day. Like you don't get the whole weekend, or you might, but even then, whatever you got this year, the other parent is going to get next year, and we alternate holidays. And so, at most, like I said, there's going to be one day difference, because if there's an odd number of holidays that you're observing, okay, then this year, this parent got 5 of them and that parent got 4. But next year, this parent will get 4 and that parent will get 5, something like that. And so it is not enough to impact child support. You are correct.
And unfortunately, that drives a lot of thinking. And as an attorney, you can see my mind jumps right to child support, and
Yes,
it's something that parents can they can freely make those kinds of trades and exchanges and so forth without concern there.
right, right. And also, I should throw in here that even though we're saying you don't make those up, if the two of you agree to make those up, go for it. To me, it's way too cumbersome to keep track of all of that and make them up. But if the two of you agree and you want to put that in your plan and the court lets you, okay, go ahead. But I would save yourself the trouble and the time and the stress, because I guarantee you, Bobby and Susie don't care who they spend this particular holiday with, or even if they do care, they don't get to say what they want. And so that's another thing that drives me crazy, that I'm not sure you see that much of, George. But I get these parents who want to ask their kids, well, let's just ask them where they want to be, because I know they want to be with me because we're doing something fun and the other parent won't do anything. Well, kids don't get a say so in that, correct?
Correct. And really, it's, I think this is in your lane, but I would imagine that kids feel better when they are not enmeshed in those kinds of decisions. And they have structure. Their
Right.
parents say, hey, here's what we're going to do. And even better, ideally, the parents are united in what they communicate to the children about scheduling and anything else.
Yes, you can both say to your children, it doesn't work that way. No, this is your mom's day or dad's day or whatever. But yes, be a united front. That's a really, really good point, because often parents will use it, they'll take the opportunity to try to make the other parent look bad. Like, well, your dad just doesn't want to let me have any holidays, or something like that.
Well, and as I say, it goes back to the greatest gift perhaps that a parent can give a child is permission in word and deed to love the other parent. And
Yes,
it takes courage and commitment at a time when the parent is suffering. And while the parent is suffering, uh, we can still typically appeal to the parent and say, we don't want your child to suffer along with you.
right, right. And there's that item in the best interest statute, at least in Colorado, but I think all states have a similar statute that says that both parents will encourage the sharing of love, affection, and time spent with the other parent or contact with, however it's put. With the, you would probably know better than I do how that's worded, but it's implying you'll encourage holidays with the other parent.
Well, and I think for me, one of my favorite anecdotes about that is your experience with your son going skiing with his dad.
Yes, yes. And he wanted to do that. I let him do that. And then when I needed a Thanksgiving, because they went on Thanksgiving, when I needed one, because we had a big family event going on, I easily got it. But it's because I didn't care. It was more important that my son enjoy some time with his dad. And that's where he wanted to be, was skiing, not home watching me cook. And so
But
parents, yeah,
the extension of that consideration to dad resulted in reciprocation when you wanted time for an event that was important to you. And
absolutely.
I think most people return good for good and bad for bad. So
Yes.
that's a lesson to be learned there.
Yes, you're gonna get back what you put out. And if you put out generosity and sharing and caring, you're gonna get that back. And if you put out, obstructing the kid's time with the other parent and being hateful, that's what you're gonna get back.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it can't be overstated.
No, no. And
Even
again,
while the case is pending, I typically told clients a little grace extended goes a long way.
yes. Oh, yes. That's what looks good to the court is when you have given and you have shown grace and cooperated. And that's what the court is looking for. And then you're going to be in their good graces. But a lot of parents can't handle it that way. And going back to children and asking children, I didn't have to ask my son what he wanted to do. I knew he wanted to go skiing, not watch me cook at Thanksgiving. Who wouldn't? What kid wouldn't? As long as they enjoy that activity. And I knew my son loved skiing. And so to let him go was a no brainer. And I didn't have to ask. Now, would he have told me if he didn't want to? Yes. And then we would have dealt with it. But most parents don't have to ask their children. And if they're asking because they think it's going to be in their favor, shame on you. Don't ask.
Well, does that mean that we can come over to your house and watch you cook on Thanksgiving?
Absolutely. Come on over. Come on over. But you get what I'm saying. Some parents ask because they think they know what the child's going to say. And chances are the child only says what they say because they think that's what you want to hear. It may not even be what they truly feel and want.
I think that's true. And again, to the extent that parents shield their children from being enmeshed in those conflicts,
Yeah.
which may seem minimal to the parents, but to the child, it may be very compelling.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. More on that when we come back. Let's take a quick break. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. I have got a bit of a scratchy throat, so bear with me here, George. I hate it when I have to talk and I have throat or voice problems, but that's why I have a co-host, huh? Anyway, before we went to break, we were talking about kids telling parents what they want to hear. I'm going to tell you right now, I see, and I don't mean you, George, but the audience, I see kids in my office every week who I witness telling one parent one thing and the other parent something else because they think that's what each parent wants to hear. And when it comes to holidays or anything, but we're talking about holidays today and vacation time and any of those kinds of breaks, spring break, any of that. If you put your child on the spot and you ask them what they want, you know they're going to tell you whatever they think you want. Kids are smart. They know what you want them to say. And George, I know you don't deal with that, but you've dealt with it in your life, and I'm sure with clients too. But don't you agree that we see kids all the time tell each parent what they think they want to hear?
Well, not only that, but I think most parents, intact families, their children try to please them or at
Yeah.
least comply with their expectations for them.
Mhm.
And so that is probably exaggerated in cases of divorce or separation for the child.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. And parents will often say, well, why is my child lying to one of us? They're not lying. They do want to spend it with both of you. They don't want to have to pick. They wish you were still together. Kids,
Mhm.
most kids would like nothing more, unless they're like older and they're old enough to see that the fighting is unhealthy. And they're like, I get teenagers who are like, no, I don't want my parents back together. That was awful. But most younger kids, especially, would love to have their parents back together and just not fighting. And sometimes don't realize till they get older that that's probably not possible. And so when you ask them and they say, yeah, I want to be with you, yeah, I want to be with you, they mean it. And they're not lying to anyone. They want both of you there. And unless that's what you're planning on doing, don't ask them what they want, because you can't give them what it is that they really want.
Well, and I think one thing that I've experienced with time, time can help a parent to accept responsibility or part of the responsibility for the circumstances they're in, the breakup, what have you. With time, a parent, I think, is more able to accept that they had some responsibility in that relationship failing.
Mhm.
And when they recognize that, then the need or the urge to punish the other parent, I think, subsides a little bit.
Yes, yes, I would agree. And I think that's a really good point. And so let's talk a little bit about at what age are kids really old enough to give you an opinion? And my thought is, like I was saying a few minutes ago, unless you plan to give them what they want, and you're not going to be able to unless you get back together, because ultimately that's probably what they want. I don't know that I would ask them. We don't ask kids in intact families, do you want to go on vacation? It's we're going on vacation. So why parents think it's wise to ask kids in these situations, especially what they want, to me, it makes no sense, because you probably can't give it to them anyway. And even if, they want to spend it with this parent, unless you're prepared to give them that, you better not ask. That's the way I feel. But would you agree that, and I'm just going to throw an age out, but I jokingly say 16 and a half or 17, when you get to be those ages, now the court's probably not going to do a whole lot about parents not forcing kids to go. But what's your experience been?
Well, I think it's dependent on the individual child when he or she reaches a level of maturity where they
Yes.
can express reasoned and independent preferences, is the language of the statute,
Hmm.
uh, as to where they want to be with whom and when and so forth. But I think by 16 and a half, certainly for most kids that I've observed, they certainly deserve a voice. And
Yes.
how that voice is presented, usually I think the best manner is through a mental health professional that's on the case in some capacity.
Yes. Yes. Because then we can speak for the children and they don't have to go into court. Which, again, this week, I had a parent ask if they could take the 8-year-old to court. And I was like, no. And why they would think that's a good idea, I don't know. Except you get parents who say, well, my child wants to be heard. They want to talk to the judge. They have no clue what that looks like.
No, and judges are usually very, very hesitant to interview a child. They don't like to bring children into the fray. Occasionally, I've seen a judge interview a child, and when I say child, typically we're talking into the mid teenage years or older. In chambers, the parents are excluded. Oftentimes, the attorneys are invited to attend and say nothing. um,
Right, right.
and, and that's probably a good idea because we
Yes,
always have something to say. Um,
right.
but the court really does do a pretty good job and tries real hard to shield children from the fray and keep them out of the fight and out of the process, other than having their voice. Again, probably the best presentation through a mental health professional that's on the case in some capacity.
Yes. And we're neutral. We don't care. You know, you get parents who think that we have chosen sides. I can't tell you how little I care about what each parent wants. And I mean that. I mean, my job is not to work with the parent and get them what they want. That's your job. But my job is to do what I think is best for that child. And so even if I really like one parent better or really don't like one parent, I'm still going to do what I think is best for the child and not go in and say what I think this parent wants because I like them and I'm on their side. And speaking of sides, George, where do people get this idea that there are sides?
Well, I think if they're involved in a divorce or a separation that involves the court on some level, uh, the attorneys communicate pretty well that it's an adversarial process.
Yep.
And so, by definition, you're going to fight. And the more you fight, the more you're going to fight. So it's a kind of a bitter pill to swallow.
Yes.
But that's the reality of the situation, and that's where I come up with the idea that parents do not litigate their way to a healthy co-parenting relationship.
Yes. Amen. That is so true. And I gave you that bait, not knowing if you were going to take it or not, because that's exactly what I was getting at. No offense. But you know it. You've taught me this, that it's to the attorneys an adversarial process, and they're in it to fight and win.
That's absolutely correct. And we have a
Yeah.
legal obligation to pursue the goals of the client for the representation. And so,
Yeah.
unfortunately, even if those goals are unreasonable or unhealthy, not in the best interest of their children, we still have a legal obligation to pursue that on behalf of the client. And so we have an internal conflict there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we try to resolve that by educating the client, appealing to the client's higher self, if I could use that terminology,
Mhm.
um, and we understand that it takes courage and selflessness. But again, one of the great frustrations that I had was when an opposing party just takes the position, whatever my attorney wants is fine with me. The
Right.
client has to understand that it is, in fact, their case. It's not the attorney's case.
Right.
And so they need to express their preferences and the reasoning for those preferences to the attorney, who can then move forward with pursuing reasonable preferences and hopefully pursuing some alternative to the litigation track.
Yes. Yes. I have participated lately a few times with a CLR, child's legal representative, which is akin to a GAL. I think we talked about this last week, actually. But guardian ad litems are in dependency and neglect cases. CLRs in Colorado, anyway, are what we use in domestic relations cases. And there's a CLR in particular who has had me participate in several settlement conferences with her, both parents and the attorneys. And it's very much like mediation, except we get a lot more in depth and go into a lot more detail with the parents than what I think probably most me or many mediators, I don't want to say most, I don't know what most do, but I think more than what many mediators do. And we can explain to them the pros, the cons, let them decide. But I have to tell you, in that process, in participating in that, I have seen attorneys, because sometimes we'll separate them. We'll talk to this parent and their attorney, and then that parent and their attorney. And I have seen attorneys discuss with their client, I really wouldn't recommend this. I really don't think it's a good idea. And the client will say, no, but that's what I want to do. And the attorney will say, okay, if that's what you want to do. And I see that internal conflict because I can tell that attorney is wanting to scream, no, to the client, but the client is insisting. And it usually doesn't go as quickly as I said either. I mean, I see some attorneys make a real concerted effort to talk that parent out of whatever they're wanting them to do, and the parent just won't budge. And I imagine that happens quite a bit.
Um, Actually, unless there's some pretty extreme circumstances, domestic abuse, something like that, the client is usually flexible, at least to an extent. They're not going to come in with an extreme position and say, "I want every day," or "I don't want any days," or something like that. But they do have some flexibility. Uh, they do most of the time, I think, tend to learn as the process goes on and they interact with their attorney what is relevant to the court, uh, and so as time goes on, they do acquire some education as to what's relevant to the court, what's in the best interest of their child. Why I think there's a learning curve there that goes on for most people,
Mhm.
and that's helpful. Um, but again, time will often help that to some extent.
Yes. And many parents, probably most parents, don't have an understanding of how the courts work. And so they really are looking for us to educate them and explain it. But what cracks me up and makes this whole process difficult is when you get parents who come in and they think they know, and they are so wrong. Like for years, when I started doing this type of work, I would have parents come in and say, I want the standard every other weekend for dad. It was usually dad.
Mhm.
And I would have to tell them, we haven't done that as a, general practice for years. And yet they still think that's what we do because we did that 50 years ago.
Yeah, I think I was very frustrated for quite a while when I was practicing that assumption was still prevalent in the legal culture, and
Yeah,
so we had fathers who had to fight, for lack of a better way to put it, for a reasonable amount of time. And I would tell my fathers, you're not a visitor in your child's life, you're a parent.
right.
And so the idea of quote unquote visitation could be very toxic in that context.
Yes. And that's why we don't use that word as a rule. We don't use custody and we don't use visitation because you're not visiting your parent. You're spending time. It's parenting time and
And
you're
I think
spending time. Hmm.
for some parents, it's very difficult for them to accept the reality that the court is, in all probability, going to require a reasonable amount of time to be spent with each parent. Will it be exactly 50-50? No. Is it going to be as as sparse as the every other weekend and maybe a Wednesday dinner visit? That was the old bad old days.
Yep. Yep.
Probably not going to happen.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you pointed out it may not always be 50-50 either, because you get parents who think that is standard. And it depends. It depends on all kinds of things, the resiliency and temperament of your child, and the proximity between your homes and places like the child's school, stuff like that. And so there's a lot of things that go into it, and they aren't all going to be 50-50.
No, no.
Well, it's time to take another quick break, but we will wrap this up when we come back. You're watching Dr. Marlene and George on the High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. To wrap this up, George, first of all, my first takeaway message to parents is don't try to make up holiday, vacation, break time, whether it's spring break, summer vacation, any of the holidays. We don't try to make that time up. It's way too cumbersome. And we have, what, 9? I think it's roughly 9 holidays throughout the year that we observe. And so you are constantly going to be making up this day for this parent, that day for that parent. And it just is not what we need to be doing. Would you agree?
Yes, and if against that advice, people still engage in that, get something down in writing, in a text,
Amen.
in an email, get something down in writing, because memories fade, people's recollection of things differ. And of course, again, always the first rule, look at your parenting plan.
Right, right. Well, and it's funny too, because the parents will be real proud of themselves that they've reached this agreement. And so they'll think they don't need to put it in writing, that that's going to ruin their co-parenting relationship. And I'm like, no, it's going to preserve it, because in the event that one of you or the other or both don't remember next year what you did, then you've got it in writing. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely. In fact, the lawyer rejoices when he or she gets those types of messages that are in writing, the type of record that's able to be presented if the case goes to court. So you're certainly not prejudicing yourself in a legal sense. You're really setting up a very secure position by having some sort of a little writing about it.
Yes, yes. And then my other message is, let's not involve the kids unless you plan on letting them do what they want. And if you both agree that your 16-and-a-half-year-old can do what they want for this holiday, fine. But otherwise, let's not involve even the kids who are 16 and 17 in what they want, because you're erroneously causing them to believe that they get to just say what they want. And I can tell people here in Colorado We don't have an age at which kids can just say what they want and call the shots.
No, we have a provision where they can express reasoned and independent preferences when they're sufficiently mature to do so. So again, that's very dependent on the individual child. And
Mm-hmm.
still, the best way to present those reasoned independent preferences, if there are any, is through the voice of a mental health professional, I think. And I think the courts typically would echo that as well. They don't want kids, even 16 and a half year olds, coming to court.
Right, right. Yeah, I would totally agree. And we being mental health professionals, are going to look at kids' reasons why they want what they want. I never just take what they want at face value. I will ask them why. And my famous story of the two teenage girls who kept telling me they wanted more time with mom on the weekend. And I could not figure out why, because they did not have a good relationship with their mom. And I thought, why? Well, come to find out, long story short, mom had a later curfew at her house. And so, of course, on the weekends, they wanted to be at mom's because they could stay out later. And that suited their fancy just fine. But once I found that out, I'm like, no, you're not going to stay at mom's more on the weekend so you can stay out later. And in
Sneaky
this case,
little,
yes,
sneaky
they
little
are.
tidbit.
They are. But parents need to realize that is your kids are sneaky and they're going to be sneaky and they're going to try to sometimes get things they want, but that maybe aren't good for them. In fact, in this case, the curfew that mom was observing at her house was past legal curfew. And so I had to say, no, you're not doing that.
Well, and I think parents need to be aware. And again, if they can be united, it's a great gift they can give their children on things like media standards. If they can be the same in both homes, I think that gives the children a sense of security and continuity with the parents.
Yes. Yes, it does. And we can't dictate to parents. I've had parents ask, can you set a bedtime for our kids that we both have to observe? No, I can't. I don't have that kind of authority to micromanage your lives like that. And the court can't do that. Parents have a right to parent as they see fit. But can I talk to both of you about the importance of consistency and observing the same bedtime and things like that? Absolutely. We can talk about those kind of things. But there's a lot of things, probably most things, the court is not going to mandate for parents. And so they have to learn how to co parent. They have to.
Well, and again, I think if parents realize, like an inheritance, it's one of the greatest gifts they can give their children to give permission in word and deed to love the other parent.
Yes. Yes. It is. It is. Like, get over yourself and recognize that they have a need to love both of you. And giving them that permission it is the best gift you can give your children. It really is.
Well, and the contrast to that is litigation and the feeling of insecurity and threatening. Their world is rocking when the parents are litigating. I don't think there's any
Yes.
question about that.
No, that's right. In fact, I'll share this because it just happened this morning. I have a 16-and-a-half-year-old who wants to choose where he goes to school next year, but it's going to require spending more time with one parent. The other parent is not sure she agrees. It's the mom who he won't spend as much time with, and she's not sure she agrees. Well, the one request he has of his parents in this process, and I sent her an email this morning and told her this, is that they not litigate. And so while she's saying, well, I don't know if I can just agree Okay, well, that's exactly what he's asking you to do, because his one request is that you not go back to court, that you not litigate, that you, as his parents, respect what he, as a 16-and-a-half-year-old, wants to do and let him do it. And I can't encourage them enough to do that. Do I always think parents should let their kids do what they want? No. But when it's picking this certain school, and suffice it to say, the kid has given me adequate, more than adequate reasons why he wants that school. And to ask them to respect that and not litigate, yes, absolutely.
Well, and at the risk of putting the child in the role of emotional caretaker of a parent, which I think is almost never a good idea,
Right?
maybe the 16-and-a-half-year-old could show some sensitivity to mom and say, mom, I love you, and it's not an issue of that at all. It's some of these other uh, grounds and reasons that he has or she has for wanting to go to that school. Uh, that
Yes.
probably would go a long way as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And that is something I encourage kids to do and have encouraged him to do. In this case, it is a him, but
Mhm,
I told him, tell mom it's not personal. It's not about her. And
mhm.
we're actually going to all sit down, I think, this weekend and talk about it and see if we can get it worked out. But parents have to not take that kind of thing personally, because it's not personal.
I think it's very difficult, and parents, part of loving their children sometimes is accepting a little pain, emotionally, probably to do what's best for their child. I'm sure that there would be times when mom feels pretty lonely. There might be some tears when he is not there. But again, time will help that.
Yes.
And we want to have a basis for that relationship of parent and child to continue healthfully into adulthood.
Yes. Yes. Well, and it also sets a precedent or sets a standard for the child in how they handle things like this and how they observe their parents handling it. If they see their parents fight and litigate and, not cooperate at all, that's probably how they're going to approach their own marriage in the future.
Well, and it may bode poorly for the child in those transitional years, 17, 18, 19, maybe, of staying involved with the parents as opposed to just wanting to uh, exempt themselves from the fighting and the anger and so forth.
Yes, absolutely. Because I'll tell you, if parents continue to have a lot of conflict, when your kids get to be 18, you're not going to see a whole lot of them. And that's going to be your fault.
And might be a
I
blessing. We don't know.
You to put it that way, but it's true. But yeah. All right, we are out of time. Thank you, George, and thank you to everyone out there who listens to us and watches. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you've been watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.
Tune in to The High Road with host Dr. Marlene and gain insight into how to rise above tough circumstances and learn the skills that will help you take the high road in your life, no matter what challenges might come your way, on the next episode of The High Road.